Hello everybody, Tyrone TG3 here, Monster Horizons! That's right, I'm back. I haven't done Pokemon Horizon reviews in a while for several reasons. But I'm back now, and I decided to go ahead and put in some Pokemon Horizons episodes. I do have to do a major catch-up to a lot of these episodes, but I have been keeping up with what's been going on with the main bullet points, and also thanks to social media. And I've been basically threatened by Captain Pikachu back there in order to keep the reviews going. Anyway, so Pokemon Horizons. This is how I've decided to do it because I know I'm way behind on episodes. So, because we've gone through so much, but there are some major bullet points that happen between all of those things, and we're clearly very far into the plot right now, I decided that I'm going to be reviewing a lot of these episodes in chunks again, like I've been doing, but these are much bigger chunks in order to cover the stuff that most of y'all have pretty much already seen up to this point. And I know I've separated this first ones into the Kitikami chunk and the Area 0 chunk in order to get those out the way, because major events happen within those. And then after that, I'll be dividing them into much smaller chunks from there so that I can play catch up. For now, I'm going to be reviewing episode 68 all the way up to episode 73, which is taking to the new skies the brave Asaragi. I am Pokemon, you are me. Tinkatink's hammer was not built in a day. An encounter at the Crystal Pool, on the trail search for Kleavor, and Kleavor the lone warrior. Those are the episodes I'm going to be reviewing as of today in this part, and then we'll move on to the other chunk of episodes that lead into the next major half, which the plot has gone back in full circle, which is searching for the ancient Pokemon that evolved that belonged to Lucius. So those are the major plot points that we're going to be covering as of right now, because those are the ones that are the most important. So there's obviously some fillery-esque episodes in between all of that, but overall Pokemon Horizons does pretty much do a good job of staying on track, and we do get a good benefit to them traveling from place to place, but still having a major objective that they do while they're traveling from place to place. So episode 68 all the way up to 73 is a lot, but I can't go through a lot of them. So episode 68 is literally just the crew being introduced to the brave Asagi being like rebuilt in a way. And since it's rebuilt, they're all just going through the ship, seeing things that changed, seeing things that got better. I remember that in one of those situations, it stated that Orla says that there's even more changes to the ship that she isn't going to reveal yet. So obviously those will be surprises for later. If you had to ask me and I had to think about it, I'm pretty sure it's probably going to be like a new form change that the ship can make. That'll be pretty cool. That makes it go a lot faster, probably. Stuff like that. So it's really cool to see that. It's awesome to see Pokemon Horizons do like a One Piece deal, where they're looking through the ship in order to see all these advancements and stuff like that. It's really fun in order to have that go on. While they're taking the tour of the ship, the ancient Pokemon come back out, which are Galarian, Moltres, Lapras, and Arboliva. And they come out to pretty much test Dot, Liko, and Roy's skills and see if they've gotten any better since they had went to the terrestrial lessons that were taking place in Naranja Academy. So they end up having a battle. Liko ends up fighting off against, I believe, Arboliva. No, Liko ends up fighting off against, was it Arboliva or was it Lapras? I think it was Arboliva. Yeah, it was Arboliva. And then Roy ends up fighting against Galarian Moltres with Fuecoco now evolved into Crocolore. And then we see Dot end up fighting off against Lapras with Quaxwell. So we get like a 3v3 battle, but they're all in different spots, which I thought was pretty cool. So when that takes place, the goal isn't to obviously beat the Pokemon. The goal is to just fight them off well enough to see if they can hold their own. So I don't mind that. I think that's pretty good use of it to see if they've gotten stronger. I think it's a pretty good use of their battle prowess. So overall, real quick, if I had to give that episode a score, give it a standard 7 out of 10. It doesn't do anything realistically wrong. It's nice, like, just return to form, and we see that our heroes are back on the road to traveling. So it's a great introduction episode for this season. The next one is I'm a Pokemon, You're Me. This is when they head over to Kitikami, when they learn that Kitikami is their next destination that they need to go to in order to find out a little bit more about Lucius's Pokemon. They learn the new Pokemon that they need to find are Kleavor, Entei, and Rayquaza himself. So the mistake they end up making is something that I'll point out later on. But as of now, those are the 3 Pokemon that they feel like they need to go after. So they end up getting some intel at Kitikami. But in order to get that intel, they end up coming to Kitikami around the same time that the Kitikami festival was taking place. So they end up getting to hang out at the festival at this point. It's here where we see that Roy and Crocalor, I gotta remember to say Crocalor now. It's so weird that Fuecoco's finally evolved into Crocalor. And just to talk about it for a second, since this is the episode that focuses on Crocalor the most, I'm gonna be honest. Yes, Crocalor is still a very, very terrible design for it. It's just not a great design. It wasn't a great design in video games. It wasn't a great design even though the anime gave it a little bit of a glow up. I will say, seeing the egg off of Crocalor's head finally made me come to the realization that that's right. That fiery egg that's on Crocalor is going to eventually hatch into the little bird that hangs on Skeledirge's nose. Like, I should have been realized that, but for some reason I didn't know, and I think it took this episode for me to finally piece those two together. And that's one of the things that the anime usually does. The anime does a good job of showing off a bit more details of the Pokemon's bodily functions so that you can realize, oh, that's why that looks like that. That looks like that for a reason. But regardless, Crocalor's design is still... it's something that I really wish does end up getting changed soon, because I'm gonna be real with you, it's not my favorite. Crocalor is what essentially I call the chestnut of this situation, or well, there's Chespin into Quilladin, and then Chestnut. Chestnut, I don't have a problem with its design, but Quilladin is definitely the Pokemon that you look at and go, ugh, like the worst middle stage evolution situation. That's been done for other middle stage Pokemon too, but Crocalor is definitely the sore thumb of the middle stage evolutions for all 3 of the Pokemon, with the best being Florgato and then the second best being Quaxwell. This episode pretty much involves them clicking on the transfer machine that you actually get to see in Blueberry Academy's situation that allows you to switch places with your Pokemon so that the person's the Pokemon and the Pokemon is the person. Here, we get to see some fun stuff, and it's so weird, though, that Crocalor is still very reasonable as Roy. You would think that it would be acting like, you know, a Crocalor. But for the most part, it's not. It's actually very helpful to people. It actually helps out Roy use Crocalor's powers a bit more. Weirdly, Crocalor's sensible when he becomes a human being. Meanwhile, Roy, as a Crocalor, okay, mostly nervous because I am a human that just turned into a Pokemon. But there's a lot of mistakes that Crocalor ends up making because Roy isn't used to how Crocalor does its powers. So we end up with a lot of like shenanigans and hiding out because it can't use its powers like too much, and they can't catch on to the fact that most people know that, yo, Roy is now a Pokemon, so they got to cover it up by most of the adults, even though Liko and Doc almost figured out like immediately. Yeah, it's a lot of fun shenanigans, and during all of that we get to see Carmen. Carmen. But unfortunately, she's used as a running gag. She's mostly fighting off against Professor Freed. And it's literally like, okay, let's do this competition next, Freed wins. Okay, let's do this game next, Freed wins. All right, let's do this, Freed wins. Like, that's literally the whole joke until they eventually wind up doing a very low-budget looking Pokemon battle. And mostly the episode ends there with them essentially helping make this like fried noodle stand, and then them finally switching back to normal, and then the machine ends up getting destroyed so that we can never run into this situation ever again. Pretty like standard sitcom-y comedic based standard Pokemon episode. Nothing too crazy. Something you would definitely probably see in like the OG series. It's probably the weakest episode in this whole lineup. I'm probably going to give it about a 5 out of 10. Not the greatest. There was some funny moments here and there, but overall it just is there. It's literally one of the episodes that there. I guess it's necessary though. Only because Fuecoco did recently evolve into Crocalor, so it's good that we have a Crocalor developed episode. But again, it's middle of the road. It's one of those episodes that I almost forgot when upon doing this review. Yep, 5 out of 10. But they do lead to the next location, which is where they need to talk to Miss Briar, my least favorite character in Pokemon history, but I'll explain that later. Anyway, next episode, Tinkatink's hammer was not built in a day. This episode is character development for Tinkatink because it's one of the few Pokemon that's in the group right now that didn't evolve before Fuecoco. And unfortunately I have to word it like that because it's like every Pokemon was evolving before Fuecoco around the Naranja Academy arc. So yeah, we end up getting an episode with Tinkatink. And Tinkatink is like building its hammer a bit more. But while that's happening, it's dealing with Bombardier. And I think the one funny joke that happens is Tinkatink is so focused on building its hammer and making like upgrades to its hammer that when we hear Bombardier attack, they go ba-ba-ba-bum, and then the attack ends up happening, but the music doesn't continue because Tinkatink's still focused on the hammer. So the music just stops. And then Bombardier attacks again and go ba-ba-ba-bum. It just keeps going. Because Tinkatink is so focused on what it's doing, Bombardier doesn't get to startle it. And startling people is like Bombardier's whole deal. It drops a bunch of crap just so it can scare people. But it's not working, so Bombardier takes it personally and just steals the metal that it was working on. And then ends up like leaving out with that. Tinkatink then follows it, and we get a whole situation with Dot, Liko, and Roy and the others chasing after Bombardier and Tinkatink up until the point where they finally make it to the nest. Once they make it to the nest, a whole battle takes place between Bombardier and the other Pokemon. And while that's happening, Tinkatink continues to work on the hammer while the battle is taking place. Dot is about to go ahead and use her terrestrialization on Quaxwell, but she ends up dropping the Terra Orb, and we know why this happens. It needs to happen in this situation, specifically so that the star of the show can be Tinkatink. Tinkatink ends up like upgrading the hammer and finally heads down to the battle, but unfortunately the hammer's so heavy it can't make it to the battle in time. So while it's like rushing to the battle, we get this weirdly epic music. Like, yeah, like in addition to the fact that I think we get a Johto Wild battle theme on top of it, we get this weirdly like movie cinematic epic music that takes place in the battle with Quaxwell as well as the other Bombardiers. And we see that Tinkatink is like coming in with this hammer and is traveling with it. And then eventually, even though the hammer is heavier than it's supposed to be, it evolves into Tinkatuff. And once it evolves into Tinkatuff, it ends up able to like use the hammer effectively and knocks out the Bombardiers. And it's able to hold its own in the fight. So after that point, we see that Tinkatuff ends up trying to upgrade its hammer even more. So it's very clear this thing wants to evolve into wait, it was Tinkatink, Tinkatuff, and is it Tinkatank? I can't remember the third one. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, we end up, it's just very interesting to see the Tinkaton, that's what its name is. It's just very interesting to see that Tinkatuff is already like trying to upgrade its hammer in order to be Tinkatank, or Tinkaton. Jeez, these words. But yeah, overall, pretty solid episode, honestly. Like the battle between Tinkatink and the Bombardier, like I liked that. I like the way that they utilized it. I like the way that it's handled. I like the way that the evolution's handled. Yeah, losing the Terra Orb was convenient in the fight, but I'll let it pass only because it's very clear the moment was to make Tinkatink stronger so that it can become a Tinkatuff and overcome the battle. So honestly, I have nothing against that. I'll go ahead and give it about a 7 out of 10. But like I'll go ahead and probably yeet a 0.5 on top of that as well, because it's definitely better than I thought it would be, as well as I handled episode for Evolution. And I did enjoy the episode for the most part, so I'll go ahead and give that one. The next episode is an encounter at the Crystal Pool. This episode, they finally make it to the one area in Kitikami where the Crystal Pool is. I'm a little upset that they're not using like the cool little Area Zero music, because one thing I do love about Scarlet and Violet is the Area Zero's like ambiance music. I don't know, something about the ambiance music, the ooh doo wah wah da 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 doo doo. It's just, I don't know, it's just a whole vibe. It's like this cool little like just wonderistic vibe. And when you go to the Crystal Pool, they play like this cool, it's like Area Zero, but it's very like soft toned. It's like none of the drums and bass part. It's just like the chorus, the and I'm like, oh, but they didn't use any of it, and it makes me upset. So the Crystal Lake, the Crystal Pool just looks like some generic area. We end up getting, I believe, a fight with Milotic. Just like with Bombardier in the last episode, Milotic is one of the few Pokemon that are in the area that can terrestrialize on their own without having to have a trainer with a Terra Orb. Turns out, like, much like in the video game, there are certain Pokemon that just have the ability to terrestrialize without a trainer in that area. Milotic is one of the ones that ends up terrestrializing, and I believe Ghost is the terrestrialization it winds up using. So Liko, Dot, and Roy end up working together and end up beating the Milotic by using like combinations, and we're gonna get a lot of that in this arc where Crocolore, Florgato, and Quaxwell end up combining their powers in order to fight off like essentially a boss Pokemon. And I'm actually pretty impressed by that, only because I'm starting to see that they're using Dot, Liko, and Roy a lot more than just having Freed and Captain Pikachu solve the problem. They're doing it in ways that it's very clear they need to get Captain Pikachu and Freed out of the way to not participate in the fight. But I am glad to still see that they're using the heroes a lot more now and developing them rather than like running back and having Captain Pikachu sort of one-shot everything and save the day. So overall, I think that's pretty good. Once they end up meeting Brer, she gives them a lot of information about Terapagos, how it's not the only Terapagos that exist, how it's somehow linked to terrestrialization. You know, generic stuff that we already know if you played the video games. And we also learn about the Scarlet book. So it's very clear they're using Scarlet's, Pokemon Scarlet's history instead of using Pokemon Violet's, which we kind of already established that when they went to Naraha Academy. I kind of wish they had combined both. I wouldn't have minded if they had used Professor Toro and his Violet book while all the events still happened at Naraha Academy, which is Orange Academy. That would have been fine if they had used both. But it's very clear they're sticking to the bias and going on Scarlet instead of Pokemon Violet, which, whatever. Point being, though, we end up seeing a lot of information, and then my most hated character, Miss Briar, shows up. I do not like her, but it's mostly based on events that happen in the video game. One, she doesn't have a Pokemon of her own, so I'm not sure why she's all the way out here doing these researches but doesn't have one. Makes the lame excuse that Pokemon training is like a lot, even though she's studying Pokemon for all this time. She sends a bunch of children into Area Zero and takes no responsibility for it. She ends up pushing them in order to bring out Terapagos' powers to the point where it basically almost kills said children. She takes no responsibility for it. She gets passage into Area Zero, but at the detriment of each of those children. And then afterwards, she's just like, oh, wow, that was weird. Anyway, I used Terapagos' power in order to make it so that you can terrestrialize anytime you want inside of the biodome. Oh, me? Get arrested? No, that's cool. It wasn't like I was acting like a whole villain the whole time I was there, but I faced no repercussions for my actions. All I did was say, I'm sorry to a bunch of children for basically almost putting their lives in danger, and then I decided to, you know, live and be in the whole area. Yeah, screw you, Briar. Anyway, once they meet up with Briar, they learn all this information. They end up getting the book. Dot ends up reading up on the book a little bit to learn more information about what's going on. And then later on, she learns that that the rest of the Pokemon they're looking for, the next one is Cleaver, and it's in the area. So they go off in order to a separate area in Kitikami in order to search out Cleaver. Thankfully, we don't see Briar at all anymore after this, and hopefully we don't see her again for the remaining future. Unfortunately, this episode's getting I'm giving this episode a 4. Yeah, less than average, only because all they really did was like one boss fight and a bunch of lore that we realistically already knew, and Briar is there, and I don't like Briar. Now, not liking Briar has nothing to do with the episode's score. I just don't like her. But even if you knock that out, the episode didn't really do anything. This is supposed to be one of the most plot-heavy, lore-heavy episodes for our heroes in order to do their goal, and all it really did was point them in a direction that they realistically could have just figured out themselves with, like, you know, a little bit of foresight and research. It didn't really do much. Like, we don't get anything. The episode's just sort of there. It didn't do anything to make you really know anything else other than what already exists. Our heroes learn all this information, and then they immediately like go back to the ship and eat, and never referred to Miss Briar at all afterwards. But it does transition to us meeting up with a different character, which they end up seeing later on, who's a lot more relevant towards these situations. So with that, we'll move on to episode 72, On the Trail Search for Cleaver. And in this episode, we end up getting introduced to the girl, Perrin. I think her name is Perrin. Yeah. And we end up seeing Hisui and Growlithe. They ask how Hisui and Growlithe even, you know, exist, because it should be dead. Apparently turns out there's a lot of Hisuian Pokemon that can just sort of be alive. It's not like they so much got extinct. It's that they're so endangered, you rarely see it. It's like seeing a saber-toothed tiger in real life, but the only reason that you're able to see it is because it just somehow didn't die. It was able to just breed enough to make sure that there's more of it, but not enough to like completely die. It's weird. Point is, Perrin states that she was taking pictures one day and actually ran into Cleavor at one point. So she goes to that exact area where she found it. But in order to do that, we see that Liko, Dot, and Roy have to travel. But Dot ends up going into a Pokemon battle against Perrin in order to test whether or not she will take them in order to meet up with Cleavor. She's using Leafeon because her great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather did. So if you play Pokemon Legend Arceus, you know where that comes from. After that, though, they keep going and they're searching for it in several different areas. Perrin does like a lot of like fun little picture takes like she did in the video game. A lot of these like debuts, the characters are acting pretty spot on to their video game debut counterparts, which is good. But it also doesn't add anything to their characters that wasn't really added before, that wasn't really like different. Like, okay, Perrin acts like her video game counterpart, but this unfortunately means she just acts like her video game counterpart. Like, there's nothing new to her that's making me go, oh, sweet, cool, that was a nice additional feature. That was a fun little, like, differentiation from how she acted from the video game. No, it's literally almost the exact same, point for point. While they're all searching for Cleavor, they all get, like, different clues as to where Cleavor is. I believe the most successful here is Dot and Liko. Roy's sort of just doing his own thing with Crocalor. They don't really get much headway, but I believe Dot ends up getting a nice clue as to what's going on. And Liko gets a major clue based on like a landmark and some observations that she noticed from Cleavor's attacks on the up and coming rock areas. When she sees that the rock areas that are cut are fresh, she gets an idea of where Cleavor is, and they're able to meet up in that area and travel to where Cleavor is. Overall, I'll give the episode about a 5 out of 10. It's average. It's essentially a search game for Cleavor. It's pretty well done though, so can't get mad at it. It's just middle of the road. I wish Perrin was used a little bit better, and I kind of wish they had thrown in the Ursaluna plot. I think that would have been a really good boss fight for them to all come together and fight off against Ursaluna. But they don't do that, and it's just lame. Like, there's this one scene where Dot and Perrin get hypnotized by some Trevenants, and nothing really comes out of it. Like, nothing. It's just they're hypnotized, Dot's able to snap out of it, and they're back to normal, as if that didn't just happen. So we end up moving into the final episode of this review, which is going to be Cleavor, the Lone Warrior. Turns out once they finally meet Cleavor, Lapras ends up coming out, and we learn that Lapras's giant scar that it has was a result of Cleavor. Because when Lucius ends up fighting off against Cleavor back then, Cleavor was misunderstood and ended up attacking pretty much every area and was hated amongst the villagers, whereas Lucius ends up befriending the Cleavor, but in order to gain its trust, the Cleavor ends up attacking rationally at first and Lapras blocks the attack. So when Lapras comes out, you think the two are just gonna scrap, like they just got straight up beef. And they do, for like all of a few seconds, and then they do what's essentially a dap up moment. That's like, yo, that's my dude right there. Like they have like a rivalry, but it's a rivalry of, hey, we cool though, right? Like it's very clear that they were boxing and everybody was scared, but they have an understanding between the two. It's like, hey, come here, my dog, let's go. It's basically that, and honestly, I like that. I'm glad that there's a lot. One of my favorite relationships between Pokemon that know each other or are in the same vicinity is if the Pokemon's like love language or like language to interact with each other is a fight. Like, we're rivals, but we're friendly rivals, and nobody can understand our like brooding bond situation. It's like I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's just like we're brothers and we'll fight each other, but at the end of the day, we're still cool. Like, I like that. I like that relationship Lapras and Cleavor have with each other. And I'm glad that wasn't like the center focus of the episode, is just them fighting, because it would have been too predictable. Overall, Cleavor's whole deal is that he's misunderstood yet again. This time, he attacks a lot of things, but he's mostly doing it to protect the Pokemon that are in the nearby area. So he's attacking everything, but he's attacking it because he needs to protect those Pokemon. Cleavor accepts the deal in order to go with Liko and the others, on the exception that they end up fighting him to test their muscle to see if they're worthy enough in order to have him join the crew. They fight in like this bamboo forest, but they fight in a bamboo forest on purpose because Cleavor is like really good with its ears. So every time they like try to move and the bamboos clank like that, he knows exactly where they are and can attack them. He ends up fighting Quaxwell, Crocalor, and Florgato all at once, which that's fine. It's a Hisuian strong Pokemon with like, it's a legend Pokemon too. So like, I can understand that. And they actually do a really good strategy in order to beat it. And it's thanks to Roy. So Crocalor ends up using Flame Charge, but it does it on purpose because the way that bamboo is shaped, it has like these little knots in it. And the knots carry like a small pocket of extra air, much like a bamboo. It's hollow inside, but has a little bit of extra air in the middle because there's that space that allows them to grow as bamboo. Well, when heated up, bamboo starts off very hollow, gets hard, and then cracks. Before it cracks, though, that pocket of air has to escape, so it makes like a punk noise, like a crack noise. And they use that in order to get Cleavor's attention. So Cleavor attacks one spot, only to find out that that was a diversion so that it can get attacked by the other two Pokemon. It's a really good strategy in retrospect because they're using Cleavor's advanced hearing to their advantage instead of it using it to its. At the end of the day, the fight gets tied out with Cleavor still taking like the larger advantage. But Cleavor at this point has gotten hit enough to where it kind of understands like the others. And realistically, I think Cleavor has an advantage on every Pokemon in that area except for maybe Quaxwell. Yeah, because it's a Bug-type Pokemon, so it has an advantage on Florgato. It's a Rock-type Pokemon, so it has an advantage on Fuecoco. Or Crocalor, I'm sorry. So yeah, Quaxwell's like the only Pokemon that realistically could probably do some major damage to it. But at the end of the fight, he accepts it. He ends up getting caught by the others. We get more information on Lucius's past. And after that point, they are successful in recruiting Cleavor to the group of ancient Pokemon. And they learn more about Lucius and learn that their next destination is to go find Entei. Which, Yes, I know it's not Entei, but we'll leave that for the next one. Overall, I'm going to go ahead and give this episode about an 8 out of 10. I like the way that they use science and a battle strategy in order to fight off Cleavor. I like that Perrin's still a part of their group for a little bit, obviously. She leaves the group towards the end because, you know, the Kitikami stuff is over. So, I don't know, it's very cool to just see that she was there as a temporary traveling companion for a little bit. The way that they end up fighting the Cleavor, the backstory on the Cleavor is really good too. Sort of generic, but but I accept it just because I'm glad to see that they had a situation where Cleavor was used and it was essentially abused by villagers. And Lucius is so good at handling Pokemon that even a Pokemon like Cleavor that technically didn't like any human was able to open up and respect him a little bit more. With that being said, we also get some snippet shots of Team Explorers for like brief times, and we mostly see that Amethyst is about to basically quit and leave, and he tells his teammates to leave him alone, but they're very loyal, so they stick to Amethyst's side. Honestly, really great all around. Great cap off to the Kitikami arc. I really liked watching the Kitikami arc. Very little Team Explorers in the Kitikami arc, but I think that's okay just considering the fact that they don't need to be in every episode. They're mostly brewing in the background, so I think it's good that the characters were used effectively enough just to get us back into the swing of the crew, the Volt Tacklers doing what they need to do. So with that being said, the next chunk of episodes I will cover will be pretty much all the way going up to the episode of Grand Battle Earth Gouging Fire. So I'll be covering a large chunk of those episodes since they all revolve around Entei for now. And yes, I know it's that. And then afterwards, I'll be covering the next chunk of episodes that follow up after that. But with that being said, this has been a very long review, but I hope you all enjoyed my thoughts on the Kitikami arc of Pokemon Horizon. So I will see y'all then, everybody. Tyrone TG3 out.